Welcome to another episode of the Dissection. Today we're going to look at 4 big topics. Number 1, Gayton Mckenzie. Number 2, departures from the EFF. Number 3, questions to the president. And number 4, Panyaza Lesufi's statement to the public about all of the drama that has been playing out. So let's start with Gayton Mckenzie. Gayton Mckenzie is facing scrutiny over a parliamentary question reply that revealed that taxpayers paid out 800,000 rands for his travels to Paris during the Olympics. So Mckenzie posted on X initially that he didn't attend any of the games. He was just there for the opening ceremony and just for meetings. Then he contradicted his previous statement, admitting that he had actually watched hockey, gymnastics, rugby sevens matches during the Paris Games. He was there for 7 nights. 7 nights. And to be quite honest with you, when I listened to his explanation, right, some of the things I accepted, some of the things I laughed at. Gayton is a very good public speaker, but some of the things I had concerns about. But here is his explanation as he gave it.
I've done absolutely nothing wrong. And I'm as transparent as possible. I went there. In fact, when I saw it's 125,000 rands for 5-star hotel, myself and the acting DG, we both said we can't do this. Isn't there a cheaper hotel? I stayed in a 4-star hotel, which was a bit cheaper because it was during the Olympics. All the prices were up. And you can't compare euros with rands. Our currency is not that strong. And now people want to act like, particularly in the DA, that it's my first time going overseas. 2007, I stayed for a month in Paris to watch the Rugby World Cup. For 1 month. I flew there first class. I stayed in a 7-star hotel for 1 month. Now, because it's no longer my own money, and I must follow the rules. If the rule says I must fly economy class, I shall fly economy class. So I wanted to just get that out of the way. All the media that's here, we can still talk about if you have any further questions about the trip. But don't say I went for a joyride. And don't compare me to Mama Joy. I am not a super fan. I'm the Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture. And I'm still going to go to all the sporting events. Because that's government. Now you want to portray me as a person that's taking a joyride. That thing you can do with other ministers. You've chosen the wrong one. Because I'm flying first class all the time with my own money. And now I must fly business class. So it's not an upgrade for me, it's a downgrade. Locally I fly like business class. But as a minister, you must fly economy class. The other day I was flying was my partner, and she said, can't we book you? Because my knees are so long. Because I can't sit down and then I must stand up so that I can. But that's what the ministerial handbook demands of me. It demands of me to fly business class, to fly economy class locally. I fly twice a week and I fly economy class. Internationally, the ministerial handbook demands of me to fly business and not first class. I'm mentioning this so that people can know I've not done anything outside the ministerial handbook. I got there, I saw them saying, Mr. Mckenzie, welcome, welcome, jump in the car. Now it's being acted like I'm sitting behind the computer and go to the different airlines, which things, there are people that are hired for those. Now, if you want to play politics, it's fine. But don't play politics only with me. If I have to account, which I'm doing, we expect every minister to also account, because this is important to all of you.
Right. When I think about what Gayton said, he was there for 7 nights, okay? So I think the hotel costs are justifiable. I can understand the hotel costs. When he gave a breakdown of all of the costs, the hotel costs were a certain amount, but he spent 450,000 rands in 7 days on a chauffeur service. 450,000 rands seems to me to be excessive. I think that he could have gotten, Uber black, and traveled to all of the meetings that he said he had to attend without having spent that money. It seems to me that that was an excessive amount of money. If you think about the fact that he said he went to hockey, gymnastics, rugby sevens, sure. Then he said he attended a UNESCO meeting about advocacy and illustration for social impacts of investment in sports policies and programs. Then he went to a ministerial forum and the regional meeting of African sports ministers. Then he went to the Commonwealth sports ministers meeting. If he went to 3 meetings and he went to watch 3 sports and then he went to the opening ceremony, that shouldn't be $450,000 in costs. That's very expensive. That's 23,500 euros. Even in euros, it's expensive. I think that he may have overspent there. He made a mistake, and he needs to, when he goes on another international trip, make sure that he can cater for more affordable transportation options. He says, I looked at 5-star, I saw that 5-star is not the right answer, then I went for 4-star. He says everything that he's doing is in the ministerial handbook, but he has to realize that even though everything may be legal, there can still be ethical questions raised around utility of the money. Nobody's saying that you've never been to Paris for a month, or you never stayed in 7-star, or you flew first class when you went to Paris, etc., and you downgrade. No. People are actually saying, was the use of money justified? When you have to be a minister, you have to realize that people are going to check your actions and words more robustly now. You're not just the leader of Uns Busisiwe. Now you are also a minister of sports, arts and culture. And people are going to check to see whether you and other ministers are going to take careful care of their money. And if you're saying that, look, this is actually a downgrade for me, now my feet can't fit in economy, even my wife is complaining, you're missing part of the point, right? The explanation for the flights and accommodation makes sense. The explanation, though, for the transport does not make sense. Gayton has to realize that he has to move differently. I think every minister, especially at this early stage, can be afforded a mistake. But he needs to think carefully, right, around how he speaks about using taxpayers' money and how he speaks about those expenses. Just because it's in the book doesn't mean it's okay. It doesn't mean it's okay, right? You have to still think about good use of money. And as somebody who's been saying you're saving money, you're giving away your salary, you came in and gave an energy that suggested that, look, I'm actually going to be a cost-saving minister, not a cost-adding minister, not a wasteful minister. And you have to think about that, right? You're being put in a position now where polls are saying you are the 3rd most popular leader, you are the rising star of this GNU, you're an ambassador of the GNU. As somebody in that position, you have to realize that people are going to be a little bit more, circumspect around how you spend money. And I think that's justified. You can't be dismissive. You can't take offense. It is what it is. We'll see what happens with the EFF complaint around this expenditure. I think he was within the confines of what the rules allowed, but I think he's open to scrutiny. Of course, EFF is going to come at Gayton quite a bit now, because there's been a little bit of positioning of Gayton as, somebody who's going to block Malema and the anti-Malema, etc., etc. And he's one of the people that the markets are looking at to say, maybe we can do a deal with this guy. And part of the reason why he's showing up high in the polls is because of his own performance, because of his rhetoric. You can see Gayton is a gangster, man. He's just doing a peace sign there. He's like, don't compare me to, Mama Joy. I'm the minister of sports. Then he does a peace sign to the crowd to let them know that, yeah, Uns Busisiwe. So there's elements there, but I think there's also elements of him being pushed by the media at this particular point as an alternative to Julius Malema, which is why the EFF is putting him also in their crosshairs and trying to call out any contradictions, any dishonesty, anything that they suspect is something that is not in line with what they believe should be good ministerial conduct. This is all good. Accountability is good. Transparency is good. It's good that he answered the question. I think he has to answer a little bit more about that transport side of things because it's not adding up. Let's talk about now, as we're talking about the EFF departures from the EFF. We know that Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane left the EFF this week, articulating, amongst other things, that she was tired, that she needed to spend time with her family, that, Cyril Ramaphosa really did a number on her. This is her version in her statements, because she tried to actually hold him accountable for things that she saw in the office of the public protector that he was doing wrong when she was in that office. But when it came specifically to the EFF, she says she was not fully utilized, and she was saying this on the SMWX podcast. She says that she's not a fan, particularly of democratic centralism, that, when the organization makes a decision, every member of the organization is bound to that. She also said that she's considering her options. Obviously, she would like to do different type of work within advocacy in and of itself, in terms of advocacy for women, for people who are marginalized, people who've been victimized by the system. But she's aware that she's not necessarily going to get those types of opportunities. She may get another political opportunity. She said, listen, I've been approached by the MK many times, and whether or not she'll join the MK will depend on a variety of factors. So that was the first big departure. Then there was Fana, who was one of the early members of the EFF, somebody who has been prominent in his acting career. He was in Yizo, he was in Hotel Rwanda, he was in a variety of acting gigs, and is somebody who's well recognized to South Africans in and of himself as an entity, right? And then he also said he's leaving the EFF. He didn't actually divulge his reasons, which left it open to speculation. Then there was an announcement that 2 EFF members from the KZN region, I think they're senior members, also announced their departure from the EFF. So taken together, there was then a significant moment for the EFF in the public eye that, hey, what's going on? This is actually not a good trend. This is not a good pattern. Obviously, this has been precipitated by other departures. Floyd Shivambu, we saw, left. Mzwanele Manyi left as well. So in a way, that drinking of tea with Zuma in Nkandla has proven to be very costly for Julius Malema. Very costly because at a certain point in time, it made it seem as if there is a synergy and a closeness between Julius Malema and Jacob Zuma at the time when Zuma was facing the challenges that he was facing, right? And this is at the time when the Concord had ruled that he should be imprisoned, etc. So those tea negotiations at the time put EFF in a position where they wanted to show that we have leverage, we have access, we have influence, we're able to go to Nkandla, drink tea, and we're able to meet with this guy. Zuma obviously met with a lot of other people. So at that point, it created, convergence of interests, if you will. But when MK was launched, that had to lead to a divergence, and that divergence is still playing out as things stand right now. So at the point of convergence, you then start having people who are more Jacob Zuma faction, Jacob Zuma aligned, getting very close to the EFF, Mzwanele Manyi, others getting positions within the EFF. And I think the EFF at the time thought this is strategic, this works because these people, are going to help us. They're going to bring different audiences with them, people who support what they've done, the work they've done, etc. But what has now happened is that because of the other challenges, right, that have emerged as MK has come out onto the playing field for the EFF, this has now created this trickle of people leaving the EFF, some of them going to join MK. We'll see where Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane ends up, but that has now hurt the EFF. That decision, the drinking tea decision, has come back to haunt the EFF in a big way. So fans of the EFF are saying good riddance to these people. Good riddance to Floyd, he sold out. Good riddance to this other person. Good riddance to this other person. Good riddance to Mzwanele. Good riddance to Busisiwe Mkhwebane, because these were not authentic members of the EFF. And that they're saying now that they're going to conference with authentic members of the organization who will then be able to vote for the new leadership and then take the organization forward. In a way, I understand where they're coming from, and they are correct. You want to go to conference with, the right people in the room. You want to come out of there with a line of march, tactics, strategies that are going to take you to local government elections and help you to be successful. So I get that. There's logic to that. I understand it, right? Opponents of the EFF are saying this proves that Julius Malema is a dictator and that the EFF is falling apart and that, the EFF is on a downward trajectory. The harshest opponents of the EFF would obviously be people like the DA, etc. People, not necessarily MK, although the relationship between the EFF and MK is actually getting a little bit, what can I say? What's the word I'm looking for? It has more friction now, right? It has more friction. So the biggest opponents are saying, if this had happened to the DA, where you have all of these leaders leaving, because remember the DA had this black exodus where Mkhwebane left, Herman Mashaba left, she left earlier, Lindiwe Mazibuko, Phumzile Van Dam left. You had a lot of people, Makashule Kana. People then said, look, what's happening in this, organization? Why are so many people leaving the organization, so quickly and so unceremoniously? So they're saying, well, the EFF is going through the same moment and they deserve the same critique. I think that part of this is true. I'm going to tell you which part I think that are true. I think that the EFF is going through a defining moment, right? For the beginning of the 10 years, they were able to be on the radical left without any challenger, right? The DA was far right, the ANC was occupying that center-left type of position. So they were able to occupy radical positions by themselves. Black First, Land First came, but I don't think Andile Mngxitama was a serious challenger, and because of the way that he left the EFF, there wasn't a lot of traction that he was going to have, and I don't think they even got 20,000 votes in that election. But now, when MK has come onto the scene, trying to also occupy, a left position in a certain way, a leftist nationalist position, which is also traditionalist in a certain degree. So they're trying to put together an authoritarian left-leaning. There's this political spectrum which goes left and right, etc., etc. But then there's also the quadrant, which also looks at authoritarian, democratic, etc. And in the quadrant, you place in different parts of the quadrant. And where the EFF is right now, it's in a similar quadrant to MK, but I think MK is a little bit more authoritarian because they're saying they're not even going to do conference, etc. So they have a challenger now, and they have to go through their own defining moment and figure out who they're going to be. And this is the challenge. They've been able to deal with minor challenges of leadership contestation, whether it was Andile Mngxitama earlier. There's another lady who left, I can't remember her name. She occupied the treasurer position earlier, right? But I can't remember her name. But having said that, these were not significant challenges. I think the departure of Floyd into MK is a significant moment for them. They're going to have to really maintain their posturing, their confidence, their political agenda, and be able to weather the storm. Everybody goes through cycles, right? I don't think that they're going through a cycle which is like COPE, because COPE was not going through a cycle. They were going through a downward trajectory from the very get-go. That issue of having two leaders who were contesting the leadership position, Shilowa and Lekota, all of that, I think, undermined the projection or the trajectory of COPE from the get-go, and they never ever distinguished themselves in terms of policy, and that also made them struggle. When they got to parliament, they were not able to distinguish themselves further. They were also infiltrated by the ANC. A lot of things happened there which led to a downward trajectory. I don't think that's what is happening with the EFF, and I don't think that this is a reflection on Julius Malema's dictatorship or whatever the case may be. He's obviously a strong figure. He's obviously the leader of the EFF, and you're going to have to bump heads with him in his organization one way or another if you are taking a different position. But I don't think that's what the EFF is going through. But I do think it's a defining moment, and I do think that they are going to face some of these months of turbulence going to conference. The easiest way that the EFF can refute all of these things is to have strong performances in the local government elections. They have a lot of young people still. They have a lot of enthusiasm. They have a large support base. Their leader remains popular even through all of this mess that they're going through. But what happens at conference is going to be one of the things that's going to determine how people view them going forward. One of the other issues I want to mention here is the media focus. There's a book called Manufacturing Consent. I have it with me actually here. I managed to get myself a physical copy recently. You should get this book, right? This book speaks about how the mass media controls the agenda, the focus of many of its consumers with particular intentions and objectives, partly to make sure that it advances the interests of the elites and the owners and the advertisers. So the media has spent a lot of time talking about the EFF. And they spend a lot of time talking about them in the context of these departures from when Floyd left up until now. They are now getting more airtime. They are now platforming people who are talking about the demise of the EFF. Part of that makes me skeptical because they are trying to manufacture that. And that is what makes me skeptical. I'm not saying that the departures didn't happen. I'm saying that when you see the media over-eager to analyze opposing party, which is number 4, as opposed to number 1, 2, and maybe even 3, then there's an issue. So they're spending a lot of time on this EFF because sometimes the EFF is identified by the elite structures of South Africa as being enemy number 1. So MK, I don't think they view it as enemy number 1 because MK has not yet fully articulated their ideological agenda. And they're trying to shape that and to really capture a position. But the EFF position is very clear, right? They want to nationalize the mines, nationalize the banks, nationalize the land, expropriate without compensation. Those are the 3 things that the markets hate the most because what capitalism prioritizes is private ownership of land. They prioritize having an independence of the Reserve Bank. And they don't want privatization or nationalization of mines. So those kind of things that the EFF stands for are at the very heart of opposition to mainstream South Africa as things stands right now. So obviously, if you are a media house owned by a billionaire, right, like Kuzbeka owns Media 24, which owns News 24, right? So they own Takealot, they own a lot of entities. They're not going to be interested in this agenda of privatization. And those other entities like Rupert, if you think about his business interests, he's also not going to be interested in the privatization, in the nationalization of certain things. I actually don't agree with some of the ideas around how to redistribute land that the EFF has. However, the point I'm making now is that the media, which is trying to really gloat and rub it in to the EFF that they are failing, I don't think that they have objective and neutral analysis when it comes to that. I think part of them is actually trying to see if they can open the cracks to crack the EFF further. So I take with a pinch of salt the idea that the EFF is in free fall. I don't think that's true. I take with a pinch of salt that the EFF is going to collapse, etc. I think that obviously there was an MK factor. I think that they are going through a defining moment. We can't ignore the real objective reality that people like Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane left. But to be honest with you, I don't think that Busisiwe Mkhwebane, in the sense that she was within the EFF, was viewed by EFF-based ground level as a hardcore 100% member of the EFF. Some of the people viewed her as a strategic ally and somebody that they had to embrace. They didn't view her in the same way that they view some of the day ones. So I'm not sure if her departure is going to have such a devastating effect. Floyd Shivambu's departure, I think, was more significant. But I also think that people have factored it in already, and even though it was significant, I don't think it was destructive to the EFF. So that's my philosophy. I think that they're going to be going through this bumpy road, and it's going to be quite telling how they navigate it. The match is still ongoing, and it is a challenge, but they have to show their mettle and show how they deal with this. Let's talk now about questions to the president. I think this was one of the big moments of the week, right? So question and answer sessions are one way in which Parliament, as provided for by Section 92.2 of the Constitution, holds the President and the Executive to account. The President's questions for oral reply are scheduled at least once a quarter during session time within Parliament's annual program. Up to 6 questions about matters of national or international importance may be asked during this 3-hour session. I want to say some things about just these questions, just my broad thoughts about questions to the President as they are right now. So the time that is set is up to 3 hours, but it was about 2.5 hours of question and answer. So that already to me seems like it's not enough. 2.5 hours to deal with all manner of matters that are affecting the country. And then this guy only has to come once every 3 months. I don't think that's enough. I don't think that's enough time on the day, and I don't think it's enough number of responses in terms of just like as Parliament is operating. In the UK, the Prime Minister has to show up every week for, I think it's called Prime Minister's Questions. I'm not sure what it's called, but he has to show up every week. And then the leader of opposition, they have a debate. The leader of the opposition asks him questions directly. Every week it happens. And I think that is the level of accountability and transparency that is required. This thing of saying, no, you can only ask 6 questions, there's follow-up questions, it's very curated, it's very safe for the President, and it doesn't get to the bottom of a lot of issues. And if you look at how the last questions happened, and you can go watch them, they're on YouTube. I'm gonna maybe link also in my description, so you can go just easily find them. Half the time was spent on questions of an international nature, right? Some of these questions, I don't think they were pressing. There are some that I thought were pressing, but some I felt that they were just helping the President pad the time. This is my view, right? So some of the questions that were asked were about, the UN Security Council, permanent representation for the continent, right? And then questions about the G20 presidency and what can happen. And effectively, the answers the President gave was that, we need inclusion of African voices in these seats. And when you think about it, the premise, right, is that these African voices will advance African interests. And I'm not even sure that is going to be the case. Let's say you put DRC there and another country in the Security Council of the United Nations. Whose interests do they serve? Africa has had some very problematic African leaders. I'll give you some examples. Ali Bongo Ondimba and his father Omar Bongo Ondimba. That family led Gabon for 56 years and fundamentally served French interest. Gabon is a very rich country with poor people. The country exports most of its raw materials, which include oil, manganese, and wood, to France. Chad, another French colony, has been led by one family, the Deby family. Idris Deby led it, then Mahamat Deby led it. Since 1991, it has been led by one family for 33 years. Cameroon has been led by one man, Paul Biya. He's ruled the country via Bluetooth since 1982. This guy is 91 years old. I say via Bluetooth because in the recent years, he hasn't even lived in the country. He spends most of his time in Switzerland. He's so sick. He has to be close to Swiss medicine, Swiss doctors, everything. His people are dying from poor healthcare. I've been to Cameroon. There's a lot that is not good in terms of how the government has run that country. You can just tell that Cameroon, it has got failed government. It's failed government. But their president, France, gets everything they need from Cameroon. And they've backed this guy. They've backed Deby. They've backed Ali Bongo and Omar Bongo. They backed them. So what I'm trying to put across is that there are many countries within Africa where if you pay careful attention, right, some presidents, they go and they hang out with Prince Charles. Did you see how African leaders were busy there in the past when it was Queen Elizabeth's funeral? Imagine minerals were taken, artifacts were taken. They are still in the UK. The colonialism that UK did in Africa was also very atrocious, and they haven't fully accounted, apologized, or anything. A lot of UK companies are still dominating business in Southern Africa, East Africa, West Africa. They still are, right? So to see African leaders from Kenya, from wherever the place may be, laughing in a bus, they didn't even give these guys cars or anything. They put them in a bus, in a shuttle. It don't matter, you're Africans, you sit in a bus. And they felt so aggrieved, like later on they were complaining about this, like, why are we in a bus? Where's the steamer for the African leaders? There's no steamer for you guys, don't take you seriously. Point I'm making is, this UN Security Council questions and just saying that, we will advance African interests if we have African leaders sitting there. Which ones? Is Mnangagwa going to advance African interests if he's in the Security Council? These dictators, these African thugs all over the place, what are they going to advance? Which one is the African leader that is like advancing African interests right now? I don't think that there's actually any. I'm not impressed by African presidents. I don't want to lie to you. They are not good people. I can't think of one that I'm like, this guy is doing it for me. I don't want to lie. When I look at these guys and I look at the condition of Africa, I look at the inequality, the poverty. Poverty's gone up in Africa. I can't. So the point I'm trying to make broadly is that these answers I felt were not particularly that significant, right? And also I felt that it allowed President Ramaphosa to spend a lot of time speaking about things that he could just, be fluffy and grandstand and all of these things, but it's not dealing with any of the challenges that South Africa is facing, and it's spending a lot of time on them, right? Questions about G20, UN Pact, all of this stuff. Okay, look, I think the question on Israel and South Africa was relevant and important because South Africa took this case to the ICJ. So it's important. South Africa's taken the lead on this issue. It was important for that question to be asked. But aside from that, I felt speaking about UN was not good use of time. I really didn't think it was good use of time. The other questions that the president faced, questions on Simelane, they're not going away, right? What steps he needs to make sure that members of his cabinet act in accordance with government commitment. He was asked 2 questions on Simelane, and the first one he was a little bit dismissive, I'm taking my time, etc. Then he said, no, look, I'm really going to do due diligence, etc. But I think it's not going to go away. But he's in a predicament, and I don't know if the fact that the public protector in Limpopo, released him was because of Simelane. Because remember, the Minister of Justice is not a toy in the legal system. She oversees everything, including the National Director of Public Prosecutions. And Simelane is from Limpopo, So I'm not saying she did or she didn't. I'm just saying that, if I were her, I would benefit from making sure that there's no pala matter for the president before he goes to the Constitutional Court. He seems to be taking his time on this thing, but I don't think he's got a way out. It was a very serious question, and I think just saying I'm taking my... Also, how much time do you need? She sent her report. You've heard her explanation in Parliament. What is additional that you need to know about this? I think that the facts are not in dispute. It seems to me that President Ramaphosa is very comfortable to run down every clock that he can. Right, so he can come next to the next president's questions and still not have dealt with this issue, and get to the state of the nation and still not have dealt with this issue, and get to the debate on SONA, still not having dealt with this issue. It doesn't really feel to me that he has an appetite to do anything to Simelane. It doesn't feel like he wants her to be the first person in the cabinet to go. He doesn't want it. It's a serious portfolio, and we've seen reports saying that he was aware really from the get-go. She told him, and that's what Sunday World was reporting, right? So if that's accurate, then there's a problem. Because the DA is not going to stop asking. Other parties are not going to stop asking. He had some soft questions also on the GNU. Are you going to make the GNU part of... I think those questions were really sweetheart questions. Maybe to make this thing more effective, they should really just let opposition ask. If you're in the GNU, what is the value of you asking questions? Because your questions are going to be articulated in, or your concerns are going to be articulated in the midterm budget speech. They're going to be articulated in the various speeches given by ministers. They're going to be articulated in SONA, etc. I don't think you should get to ask questions as well. I think the questions should be very important for accountability, for transparency, for follow through on things that have been done or not done. For there to be questions that are sweetheart questions like this, I think takes away from the process, because it's only 3 hours. If you spend 1.5 hours on sweetheart questions, then what? What does that even do? I think that's something that we have to consider and just think about whether or not it has merit, right? So a good question that I think he was asked was one from Mkhwebane, which was about the question of the costs of the cabinet, because each cabinet minister has 10 or so staff members. Some of them have 15 on average, costing 10 million per office, excluding the minister's cost, excluding VIP. This stuff could go into the billions. So Musi was saying, listen, if it's $1 billion or so a year for this cabinet, shouldn't you reduce the cabinet, etc.? And then the president said, no, we'll reduce, we'll see what to do, we're mindful, we'll manage the costs. And I think that question was not a good answer, but it is what it is, because they had to make these deals to get this GNU cabinet. And that's something that I think is also going to be something people have to think about for a long time, because, both the DA and the ANC ran on that they need to, not necessarily the ANC, but President Ramaphosa has spoken many times that the cabinet is bloated, it needs to be leaner, etc. People have argued that deputy ministers don't serve a full function. They do now, because they are also keeping an eye on the ministers, the ones that are, ANC deputy ministers working with DA ministers. But in general, it's been said, no, these entities don't serve anything. He had a question on Phala that he also just said, no, I've answered these things, I've dealt with these things. I didn't think he really answered in a genuine way. I think that the question was good from MK. I don't think he's answered. It just, sometimes it's like President Ramaphosa thinks that we accept everything that he says as sacrosanct, as if, we are not aware that some of the issues, the entities that he said have looked into these matters. He says, no, SARS has looked into this, Reserve Bank has looked into this, Hawks have looked into this, and he's just mentioning these entities. But we know specifically what each of those entities said. And some of the answers that they gave were not clear. For instance, the Reserve Bank said you had the money, which was not legally in your possession, but because the buffaloes were never sold. Because what the Reserve Bank said is that the sale was not complete. What the public protector said is that he doesn't sell. But what Reserve Bank said it's not perfect, the transaction, because there were supposed to be things that were supposed to be done for this buffalo to pass over in ownership to Mustafa. And because those things were not done, it's okay. But that's not really being cleared in the real sense. It's not, because what if Mustafa had gotten the certificates for the buffaloes? Were you then going to deposit the money? Is that why the money was in the SOFA? The public has got many questions around why was the money in the SOFA, and it's not enough just to simply say, listen, everything has been dealt with, because there are still issues and concerns. Even the thing to say, no, Parliament has already dealt with the Section 89 panel, they blocked it because, in part, your guys said you were going to take the issue to court. You didn't take the issue to court. You withdrew the application in totality. Yes, you tried to go to the ConCourt, and they said, no, we're not going to hear this matter. It's not ripe for ConCourt. But you could have gone to a high court. You could have gone to any other court for a review of those findings if you wanted to. So, yeah, his answers, I think, maybe he's always confident when he answers, but that confidence doesn't always translate to persuasion, is what I'm trying to say. He was also asked about criminal syndicates and are there going to be any changes in policing. He just said progress is being made. We're beginning to see progress. Task teams are being set up, but I don't think many people think that there are real changes in policing. And there's been some stuff happening in KZN, and KZN is one of the more dangerous provinces. It has one of the top 10 police stations that have violent crimes reported. We'll see if this tactic, Mkhwebane, is going to translate to a national strategy, and maybe that's what he thinks. And we'll have to see the next quarter crime stats to see if KZN matters went down. That will really tell us whether or not it happened. One thing that I'm irritated about the questions is that MK, no man, no, you didn't kwaza. You didn't kwaza. You wasted 2 mkwazos there because MK wasted 2 questions. Des Van Rooyen ran out of time before you could ask his question. He was mumbling. He was, man, come on, you didn't kwaza there. That was not cow information. Shaka Zulu wouldn't like that. That was not and it allowed President Ramaphosa just to say, what, and move on and make a joke out of that situation. VG Reddy, same thing. Mumbled part of his question. His question was overbroad. So that was, VG Reddy went first, wasted question. And then Des Van Rooyen went also, wasted question. The only question that really landed was Dr. John Hlophe's question. You can't do that as the official opposition. Lose 2 questions. No, you didn't kwaza there. You didn't kwaza count out. That was a big miss. That was a big miss. 2 big misses. Guys, you need to practice your questions. Whether or not you support MK, you have to appreciate that they are operating now as official opposition, and they are the only or one of the few entities that can bring transparency and accountability. So when they fail to ask, no, MK, practice, prepare, time the questions, make sure that you have people who are ready to ask questions. Don't get carried away by the preambles, etc., etc. The answer is what you're looking for. So keep your question proper, factual, directed, so that we can get answers. Otherwise, you're wasting time. You're wasting time. I want to move on to one of the guy who's under attack everywhere, Lesufi. Yo, Lesufi is under attack. He issued a statement. This is what he said. I'm going to read out his statement. I'm sure many of you have now witnessed the relentless and desperate campaign the DA is running to I'm sure many of you have now witnessed the relentless and desperate campaign the DA is running to first to unseat me as premier, second to destabilize and choke the Gauteng province. The DA has vowed to do this since I am deemed to have robbed them a seat at the Gauteng table based on the announcement of the Provincial Government of Unity. It must be noted that the DA was given an opportunity to participate in the Government of Provincial Unity but chose not to. Instead, they threw at us what we deemed as unreasonable demands that we could not accept. Now, they are running a campaign to paint me as corrupt, irrational, and an ANC rogue. I serve as premier at the behest of my organization, and although I'm humbled by the faith the organization has on my leadership skills, I do not take this appointment for granted. I remain resolute that Gauteng, and indeed the country, needs to prosper for all that live in it. We can only prosper as individuals if our province and our country prospers. I invite the DA to play a more meaningful role in creating that ideal and to stop personalizing matters that can be debated in the legislature and stop playing in the public gallery in order to create a monster out of me personally and to sway perception in their favor. Our people are not stupid. It makes me wonder, where would we be had we not been brave enough to resist the DA takeover of Gauteng, a call they so desperately yearn for. My message to the DA is try harder, masters. The slaves have woken up and smelt the coffee. Okay, so Panyaza is clearly feeling, frustrated by the attention that is coming, because now the attention is coming from AfriForum, it's coming from the DA, it's coming from Daily Maverick, it's coming from a lot of places, and he's feeling the frustration. But one side is saying, listen, don't personalize this attacks. Then at the end, he's saying, masters. My message to the DA is try harder, masters. The slaves have woken up and smelt the coffee. You're also personalizing it. You're also being dramatic. You're also doing the same thing that you're saying that they're doing, right? It's very clear to me that there is a campaign to paint Panyaza as corrupt, as irrational, and an ANC rogue. We've seen Helen Zille pushing this from a while back. She's now pushing it further because they've lost Brink. And the DA is mad. They are seething that they lost Brink as mayor of Tshwane. And there are some people who say that it was because there were some IPP deals that they were about to make, etc., lease some property or some power stations to private companies. I can't remember the full story. I'll look for it at another stage. But that's what some people are saying there on the internet around why they're so mad. They're clearly angry about this, and they're clearly angry that not only did they lose that, they've lost that GNU seat in Gauteng. And Lesufi has given them a few L's, and not only that, he has given prominence to another enemy of the DA, Herman Mashaba. So they're angry. And originally, they tried to attack Herman Mashaba, but now they've realized that, there's low utility from attacking Herman. His party is not as big. Let us just go and attack, Panyaza, and also problematize Panyaza. Now, having said all of that, that's what the DA is doing. Panyaza also needs to appreciate that he has to, when you are being set on fire, the fire of attention, you have to perform, Baba. You have to perform. And sometimes, people are critical of Panyaza because of what is known as Lesufiism. Lesufiism is basically described as the appearance of being busy, but doing nothing. And sometimes Lesufi will be very PR heavy. And then when you look at the programs, they're not properly rolled out, or they are missing links, etc., etc. So the community policing, for instance, was rolled out fast only to discover that there was no command center, certain trainings that were required were not done. But at this point, millions have been spent buying helicopters, BMWs, guns, all of this stuff. Lots of money, lots of procurement, but not a lot of delivery. Right? So people have seen these community protection wardens in some places, but I don't want to lie. Many people that have seen them and spoken about them have said that they're not seeing the difference that they're making. So that perhaps is an example of Lesufiism, right? Where lots of theater, lots of performance, but substance, juice, very little. And that's something that he has to be aware of. And now you are under more spotlight because people are looking at you as though you are a contender for the presidency of the ANC. You may say you don't want that, it's not your turn, it's not your generation's turn. That's what he said on SMWX. But everyone who's run for president has said, I'm not interested. Right? Some people said they want to coach Bafana. Some people said all kinds of things. But they all say, no, I'm not interested until they were interested. So we know that you can't always declare, especially at this early stage, that you want to run for president. But that's going to be the game. People were raising issues about water. He said water, is not the competency of the province, it's a national competency, etc. But Gauteng is facing water problems. He can't answer like that now. He has to answer in a way that shows that, yes, this is not my area, but I'm proactive. I'm not reactive. I'm actually, even though it's not my competency, going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. I've never liked it when the DA sometimes, because what the people are saying is that no, but when DA had a water issue, Helen Zille took front stage there. She did, even though water is a national competency, if we accept his argument. DA did that for water, but they've never done it for crime. Crime, they've always said, no, crime is not a provincial competency, it's a national competency. That's why we want devolution of powers, blah, 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 blah. So they did it for water, but they didn't do it necessarily for policing. Mr. Lesufi, you're going to have to recognize that now you have more scrutiny and you have to perform. There are many challenges in Gauteng. You have to perform. Otherwise, those criticisms are going to land. You have to deliver. And you still need to be held accountable for anything that you may be involved in, right? Or may have been involved in. There are so many scandals that we've heard about through the media, which is against you. Fair. But also everybody has to be held to account. Accountability is not just for favorites or for the enemies of whoever. Regardless of popularity, we need to be able to say, hey, if a politician has been involved in stuff, let's find out. Let's get to the bottom of it, and they must account and they must be held accountable, whether they are popular or not popular. whether they're enemies of the markets or they're not enemies of the markets. So some of these criticisms, I think, need to be ventilated, right? That reports were being hidden, etc., etc. We can't ignore stuff. The biggest problem that we have in Africa is that we praise politicians as if it's church. It's not church. It's not church. Everyone has to account. Everyone has to explain themselves. We can't praise politicians. And some of the allegations being made around Panyaza are serious allegations, right? That he has overlooked or helped bury certain reports, etc. All of that needs to be ventilated properly. It can't be hidden. It can't be ignored, right? So, Mr. Lesufi, you need to clear your name in the public domain as well, because these guys are not going to stop. And if there's something there, they're going to find it, right? And you have to also articulate how you're going to improve the project management side of things, because there is a difference in experience between standard of delivery in Gauteng and standard of delivery in the Western Cape. I'm at the Cape Town Marathon today, which is why I'm not in the lab, as you can see. So I'm recording offsite, but I brought the lab coat. We are still dissecting. But when you are in the Western Cape, you do see some differences. And I'm aware that the Western Cape does not deliver equally, especially to the poor areas, Khayelitsha, Langa, Cape Flats. They don't deal with a lot of issues. Those issues are ignored. But at the same time, I can't ignore what is happening in the CBD and other places. They are doing better than Gauteng. So you need to match and exceed. You need to match and exceed. Because if you just do what DA does, you are just no better than them in that, ignoring the poor side of the city and the province. You need to be able to deliver in business areas, middle class areas, commercial areas, industrial areas, but also deliver for marginalized areas. You do. And this is going to be the challenge. It's a leadership challenge. You have to rise to the occasion. You have to rise to the occasion. And that's what I think needs to happen here. I think he's right that the DA is attacking him. I think it's clear why they're attacking him, because they were not planning on working with him in the next stage. The DA is trying to eliminate Mashatile. They're trying to find somebody that they think they can work with. And it's clear Helen Zille has been negotiating. How do we do these other deals with Mbalula? So she was trying to take Mbalula forward as maybe the person who the DA does the next set of coalitions with, and they're hoping that Mbalula is the guy who emerges from conference. That's what I think they're doing. And Panyaza and Mashatile are in the way. But regardless of that, regardless of what the markets want, think, etc., individuals still have to perform. So yeah, that's all the time I have for today's episode. I don't know, what do you guys think? Let's have a conversation. Till the next one.